There comes a moment in life when the things that once lit you up stop hitting the same. The music doesn't move you, the goals don't excite you, the conversations feel empty, and you start wondering what's wrong with you. But let me tell you something real. That feeling isn't weakness. It isn't laziness. It isn't depression by default. It's a signal. When you start losing interest in everything, that's usually the sign that something deeper is beginning. A transition, a reset, a call to level up. Growth doesn't always feel like motivation. Sometimes it feels like boredom with the old version of yourself. Now let's break this down. There comes a point where the world around you doesn't match the world growing inside you anymore, and that gap is where the discomfort starts. You wake up and nothing looks different on the surface. Same streets, same faces, same conversations, same routines, but internally you're somewhere else. Your mind is asking bigger questions, your heart is pulling you towards something more, and your spirit already left the room, even though your body is still sitting in the same chair. That's when frustration shows up, not because life is bad, but because life has stopped challenging you at the level you're operating on now. You might still be doing what you've always done, showing up to the same job, hanging around the same people, running the same daily loop, but it doesn't hit the same. What once gave you energy now drains you. What once felt normal now feels heavy. You're not tired physically, you're tired mentally and spiritually. That's a sign that your internal growth has outpaced your external environment. And when that happens, staying still starts to hurt more than moving forward. A lot of people mislabel this stage. They call it boredom, they call it losing motivation, they call it being ungrateful. But the truth is deeper than that. This is what happens when your standards rise, but your surroundings don't. You start craving conversations with depth, but all you hear is surface noise. You want to talk about goals, vision, progress, and purpose, but everyone around you is still laughing at the same jokes, complaining about the same problems, and repeating the same cycles. At first, you try to adjust, you try to fit back in. You tell yourself you're overthinking, but your spirit doesn't lie to you. It keeps tapping you on the shoulder, reminding you that you're playing small by staying comfortable. Think about anyone who came from a limited environment but carried a larger vision. At some point, the familiar starts to feel foreign. The habits that once bonded you to people now feel like chains. The lifestyle that once felt like home now feels like a ceiling. You start noticing how time is being wasted, how potential is being ignored, how dreams are being talked about but never acted on. And that awareness creates distance. Not because you think you're better, but because you're becoming different. That's where the loneliness creeps in, because outgrowing your environment doesn't happen with applause. It happens quietly. You're still in the same room, but mentally you're already planning your exit. You laugh less, you speak less, you observe more. And people might feel that shift. They might say you changed. They might say you're acting different. But growth always looks like distance to people who aren't growing with you. This stage forces you to confront a hard truth. Loyalty to people, places, and routines can't come at the cost of loyalty to your future. There's nothing noble about staying stuck just to make others comfortable. There's nothing honorable about shrinking yourself so the room doesn't feel threatened. Evolution requires honesty. And honesty will tell you when an environment has done all it can for you. A lot of frustration comes from trying to extract inspiration from spaces that no longer feed you. You keep showing up hoping something will spark again, but it doesn't, because you already took what you needed from that phase. That season taught you lessons, gave you roots, gave you perspective, but it wasn't meant to hold you forever. Just like childhood isn't meant to be permanent, neither is any environment that stops challenging your growth. And here's the part most people struggle with. Outgrowing your environment doesn't always mean physically leaving right away. Sometimes it starts mentally. You start investing in yourself quietly. You start reading different things, listening to different ideas, thinking in longer timelines. You start seeing moves before they happen. And that inner shift makes the outer world feel slower. Conversations feel repetitive, energy feels stagnant, and that gap creates restlessness, not because you're lost, but because you're being stretched. That restlessness is important. It's the pressure that builds before change. If you didn't feel uncomfortable, you'd never move. Comfort is the enemy of growth, and when your environment becomes too comfortable, it slowly suffocates your potential. That's why ambition feels like irritation at first. You can't explain it to everyone. You just know something has to change. This is also where self-doubt tries to sneak in. You start wondering if you're the problem, if you're being impatient, if you're expecting too much. But look at history, look at real progress. Every major shift started with someone feeling out of place in the room they were in, feeling misunderstood, feeling underutilized. Feeling like they had more to give than the environment could receive. That feeling isn't arrogance, it's awareness. Ego says I'm better than everyone else. Evolution says I need different soil to keep growing. A plant doesn't apologize for outgrowing a pot. It either gets replanted or it dies. And people are no different. When your mind expands, your surroundings must expand too, or you'll feel trapped inside your own potential. Outgrowing your environment also teaches you discipline, because not everyone gets to leave immediately. Some people have responsibilities, some people have obligations, some people are building quietly before they make a visible move. And during that time, you learn how to protect your energy, how to move in silence, how to stay focused even when nothing around you reflects where you're headed. That's where character is built. You begin to realize that every environment has a shelf life. It either evolves with you or it expires. And clinging to expired spaces keeps you emotionally and mentally stuck. Growth demands separation not out of disrespect, but out of necessity. You can still love people without living at their level. You can still appreciate where you came from without staying there. This phase is uncomfortable because it asks you to choose between familiarity and future, between being accepted and being aligned. And that choice defines trajectories. Most people ignore the signal and stay because leaving feels risky. But the real risk is staying somewhere that slowly drains your ambition and dulls your vision. When you no longer feel inspired by where you are, it's not a flaw, it's feedback, it's life telling you you've completed that chapter. And the frustration you feel isn't meant to break you. It's meant to push you toward rooms you haven't entered yet, conversations you haven't had yet, and versions of yourself you haven't met yet. Every major upgrade requires separation from what once felt comfortable. Not because comfort is bad, but because comfort has limits. And once you hit those limits, growth demands movement. That's the price of evolution. And the ones who listen to that internal shift early are the ones who build lives that actually fit who they're becoming. There's a moment in every real journey where the excitement fades and people panic because they think something is wrong. The fire that used to keep you up late starts burning low. The goals that once had you locked in don't hit the same. You wake up and everything feels quiet inside, like the noise got turned down. Most people run from that feeling. They scroll harder, chase distractions, look for quick highs, anything to fill the space. But that space isn't the problem. That space is the process. Boredom doesn't mean you lost your passion. It means your passion is changing shape. It means the old motivations don't fit who you're becoming. When you first start something, the adrenaline carries you. Newness is exciting. Progress is visible. Praise comes fast. But once you reach a certain level, the growth gets subtle. The wins stop being obvious. The path forward isn't clear anymore. That's when boredom shows up, not to stop you, but to slow you down long enough to reset your direction. Look at athletes who dominate their field. Before they break records, there's always a plateau. The workouts feel repetitive. The improvements aren't showing up on the scoreboard. The body feels stuck. That's not failure, that's adaptation. The nervous system is adjusting. The muscles are recalibrating. The mind is learning how to handle a higher level. If they quit in that quiet phase, the breakthrough never happens. The same applies to life. Artists go through it too. The ideas dry up. The creativity feels blocked. They sit in silence staring at unfinished work, questioning if they ever had real talent. But history shows us that some of the most iconic creations came after long periods of emptiness. That emptiness forced them to dig deeper, to stop copying what worked before, to reach for something more honest. The boredom stripped away the surface level inspiration and made room for something original. Entrepreneurs feel this in a different way. Early on, hustle feels exciting. Every move feels like progress, but eventually the chaos turns into routine. The grind becomes predictable. Revenue stabilizes, but fulfillment drops. That's when boredom creeps in, not because they failed, but because the mission needs refinement. That pause is where strategy replaces impulse. It's where vision gets sharper. Science backs this up. Studies on peak performance and creativity show that periods of disengagement often come right before breakthroughs. The brain needs downtime to reorganize information. Old neural pathways weaken so new ones can form. When stimulation drops, clarity rises. But only if you don't interrupt the process by constantly numbing yourself with noise. When nothing excites you, it feels uncomfortable because you're used to chasing motivation. You're used to reacting to external triggers. But boredom is teaching you how to sit with yourself without distraction. It's stripping away fake urgency. It's forcing you to ask better questions. Not what keeps me busy, but what actually matters now. That quiet phase is dangerous for people who need constant validation because there's no applause there, no instant reward, no clear feedback, just you and your thoughts. And that's why many people quit right before things change. They mistake silence for stagnation. They mistake stillness for failure, but silence isn't empty. Silence is preparation. Think about the moments before a song drops, before the beat switches, before the energy shifts. There's always a pause. That pause makes the next frequency hit harder. Life works the same way. Boredom lowers the volume so you can hear what's trying to come through next. This is also where identity gets challenged. When you're no longer excited by the things that once defined you, you start questioning who you are. That's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Because growth requires shedding old identities. You can't evolve while clinging to versions of yourself that already serve their purpose. Boredom forces honesty. It reveals whether you were chasing the craft or just the feeling, whether you love the process or just the attention. And that clarity hurts, but it also frees you. Because once the illusions fall away, what's left is real. The mistake is trying to escape this phase instead of listening to it. People jump from goal to goal, relationship to relationship, project to trying to recreate the initial spark. But sparks aren't sustainable. Fires are. And fires are built slowly, intentionally, with patience. When nothing excites you, you're not empty. You're being cleared out. Old desires are dissolving. Old motivations are losing power. The space you feel isn't a void. It's a foundation being laid. Something stronger needs room to grow. That's why this phase feels uncomfortable but meaningful at the same time. There's tension without direction, pressure without clarity. But that's how transformation starts. You don't get a blueprint first, you get discomfort, and if you stay present instead of panicking, the direction reveals itself. The people who win long-term understand this. They don't rush the quiet, they respect it. They use it to sharpen their discipline, refine their focus, and reconnect with why they started in the first place. They stop chasing excitement and start building purpose. Boredom is a signal that you've exhausted the current level. That you've learned what you needed to learn here, that it's time to tune into a higher frequency. And just like any signal, it only makes sense if you're willing to listen. There comes a stage in the journey where the things that used to motivate you stop having power over you. Not because you failed to get them, but because you actually touched them and realized they weren't enough. The money comes in, the recognition shows up, the small wins stack, and instead of feeling fulfilled, you feel neutral. Not unhappy, just unmoved. And that's confusing because you were told these were the rewards that would make everything make sense. So when they don't, you start questioning yourself. Early on, surface level rewards are fuel. Money means survival, proof, momentum. Validation means you're being seen. Quick wins mean you're making progress. Those things matter when you're building from nothing. They give you confidence, rhythm, belief. But once you've climbed a certain distance, those same rewards lose weight. They don't stretch you anymore. They don't challenge you. They don't speak to the deeper part of you that's asking bigger questions now. At that point, you're not chasing the check the same way. You're asking what the check represents: freedom, leverage, time, security, influence. And if the money isn't connected to those things, it feels empty. That's why some people make more than they ever imagined and still feel unsatisfied. The reward isn't aligned with the mission. The same thing happens with validation. At first, being acknowledged feels good. It tells you you're on the right path, but eventually you realize applause is inconsistent. People celebrate you when it's convenient and disappear when it's not. You can't build a life off of claps. When you start moving with purpose, validation becomes noise. You still appreciate respect, but you no longer depend on approval to feel grounded. Quick wins lose their shine too. Short-term success feels good, but it doesn't hold you. It doesn't sustain you through long nights and hard decisions. You start wanting wins that last, systems instead of spikes, progress that compounds, something you can stand on when the excitement fades. This shift creates confusion because externally everything might look fine. You might have the job people envy, the relationship people admire, the lifestyle people chase. On paper it all works, but internally something's off. You feel disconnected, like you're playing a role that doesn't fully match who you are anymore. That's when people around you start saying you're ungrateful or hard to please. But the truth is simpler. Your internal standards changed. You grew past chasing appearances. You started craving meaning. You want your effort to stand for something. You want your time to matter. You want your work to outlive the moment. Legacy becomes more important than lifestyle. Impact starts to outweigh income, and once that shift happens, you can't unsee it. That's why some people walk away from things that look successful from the outside. They leave jobs that pay well. They end relationships that look perfect online. They step back from lifestyles that impress strangers but drain the soul, not because they're reckless, but because misalignment hurts more than uncertainty. The soul doesn't respond to applause, it responds to truth. It wants congruence between what you do and who you are. When those two things don't match, no amount of money or praise can compensate. That tension becomes unbearable, and eventually you have to choose comfort or calling, image or integrity. This is also where discipline deepens, because when you're no longer motivated by surface rewards, the work has to mean something to you personally. There's no shortcut through meaning. You have to define it for yourself. That requires reflection, honesty, and courage. You have to be willing to disappoint people who benefited from the old version of you. This phase can feel isolating because fewer people understand it. Not everyone reaches the point where external rewards stop working. Many spend their whole lives chasing symbols instead of substance. So when you start moving differently, your choices confuse people, but that's part of growth. Elevation changes perspective. You begin to see that success without alignment is just noise. That being busy isn't the same as being effective. That being admired isn't the same as being fulfilled. And once you see that, you can't go back to chasing hollow victories. This is where purpose gets refined. You stop asking what pays the most or looks the best and start asking what makes sense long term. What contributes, what builds something bigger than you, what you'd still do even if nobody was watching. You start measuring success differently, by impact instead of income, by peace instead of praise, by progress instead of popularity, and that recalibration changes everything. Your decisions get sharper, your focus gets clearer. Your energy becomes more intentional. So when things that once excited you now feel pointless, don't assume something is wrong. That's not loss, that's elevation. That's your internal compass adjusting to a higher standard. You're not losing interest, you're losing attachment to what no longer aligns. And that's one of the most important upgrades a person can make. There's a certain kind of discomfort. It doesn't feel like kids, it feels like pressure. Not loud, not dramatic, just constant. A quiet weight on your chest that follows you everywhere. You're not falling apart, but you're not at peace either. Something feels unfinished, unused, like there's more in you that hasn't been built yet. That emptiness isn't random. It's the signal that it's time to create something real. Pressure has a purpose. It exists to move things that would otherwise stay still. If life kept entertaining you at the same level, you'd never question anything. You'd never outgrow your habits. You'd never push past what's familiar. Comfort would keep you looping the same routine until years pass and nothing changes. Discomfort interrupts that loop. It forces awareness. It forces movement. Think about how growth happens in the physical world. Muscles only grow when they're stressed. Diamonds are formed under pressure. Steel is strengthened by heat. Nothing solid is built in comfort. The same law applies internally. When everything around you stops satisfying you, it's not punishment, it's preparation. That discomfort you feel is pushing you to build something that actually belongs to you, not something borrowed, not something copied, something rooted in your own experience, your own vision, your own discipline. That's why the old distractions stop working. The noise doesn't hit, the shortcuts feel empty. You're being forced to sit with yourself long enough to hear what you're supposed to build next. This is where mindset shifts. You stop thinking in terms of escape and start thinking in terms of creation. Instead of asking how to avoid the pressure, you ask how to use it. Instead of looking for relief, you look for structure. That's the moment when discipline starts replacing impulse. A new mission starts forming in that space. It doesn't come as a clear plan at first. It comes as a feeling, a sense that you're meant to contribute something deeper, that you're capable of more than consuming and reacting. that your life is supposed to stand for something beyond survival or comfort. History is full of people who hit this exact wall. There's always a phase where nothing satisfies them. Success doesn't fulfill them. Praise doesn't move them. Routine feels suffocating. That dissatisfaction becomes the turning point. It forces them to step away from what's easy and commit to what's meaningful. Look at leaders who changed industries, creators who reshaped culture, visionaries who built movements. None of them were driven by comfort. They were driven by dissatisfaction, by a refusal to accept what already existed, by an inner tension that demanded expression. That tension didn't destroy them. It disciplined them. Discomfort strips away excuses. When things stop feeling good, you can no longer rely on motivation. You have to rely on commitment. You have to decide what you're willing to work for even when the feeling isn't there. That's where real builders are separated from spectators. This is also where responsibility enters the picture. You realize no one is coming to save you from this feeling. No external achievement is going to erase it. The only way through is to build something that aligns with who you're becoming. That might be a craft, a business, a vision, a set of principles, something you can pour yourself into with intention. Pain gets a bad reputation because people associate it with loss, but pain isn't always about damage. Sometimes it's about direction. It shows you what no longer fits. It highlights what's missing. It exposes the gap between where you are and where you know you could be. That awareness hurts, but it also empowers. This stage demands patience because building something real takes time. It's not flashy at first. It doesn't come with instant validation. It requires repetition, consistency, sacrifice. And during that process, the discomfort doesn't disappear right away. It evolves. It becomes focus. You start waking up with intention instead of anxiety. The pressure that once felt heavy starts feeling like drive. The emptiness that once felt confusing starts feeling like space you're filling with purpose. That's when you realize the discomfort was never your enemy. It was your invitation. People who never answer that call stay stuck chasing relief. They bounce from distraction to distraction, trying to avoid the pressure instead of using it. But the ones who build something lasting lean into it. They accept that discomfort is the price of alignment. That pressure is the cost of growth. The truth is pain doesn't show up to destroy you. It shows up to redirect you, to pull you away from what's easy and push you toward what's essential, to force you to take ownership of your potential instead of waiting for circumstances to change. When you understand that discomfort stops feeling like a threat, it becomes a tool, a signal that you're standing at the edge of something real, and everything that comes next depends on whether you run from that feeling or build through it. There's a phase in the journey where motivation disappears on purpose, not because you did something wrong, but because you're being trained to operate without it. Inspiration is loud, it's emotional, it comes with energy and excitement, but it's also unreliable. It shows up when conditions are right and disappears when they're not. Discipline is different. Discipline is quiet. It doesn't ask how you feel. It asks what needs to be done. At this stage, you can't wait to feel ready anymore. If you do, you'll stay stuck in the same loop, overthinking every move, waiting for certainty that never arrives. Readiness is a myth people use to delay responsibility. Growth doesn't wait for confidence. Confidence is built by showing up when you're unsure. This phase isn't about hype or vision boards or motivation speeches. It's about consistency. When nothing feels clear, you wake up without direction, without excitement, without applause, and you still move, you still do the work. You still show up for yourself. That's how discipline is born. When the fog is heavy, thinking won't save you. You can analyze your life all day and still feel lost. Clarity doesn't come from sitting still. It comes from action. Movement creates feedback. Feedback creates adjustment. Adjustment creates direction. That's the cycle. People who wait to feel inspired miss that entire process. You start building habits not because they feel good, but because they anchor you. Small routines, simple structures, daily commitments you can keep even when your mind is scattered. Those habits become your foundation. They keep you moving forward when motivation disappears. You sharpen your skills in silence. No announcements. No validation, just repetition, just improvement, just progress you can't always see immediately. This is where real confidence forms, not from being seen, but from knowing you're putting in work regardless of the mood. You invest in yourself quietly. Time, energy, focus. You stop explaining your process to people who don't understand the phase you're in. You stop looking for permission. You trust that consistency will reveal what excitement can't. This is the phase where identity shifts. You stop seeing yourself as someone who reacts to feelings and start seeing yourself as someone who honors commitments. That changes everything because feelings fluctuate, commitments build character. Every step you take in this fog matters more than you realize, even when it feels pointless, even when it feels slow, especially when it feels uncomfortable. Those steps are training you to operate under pressure, under uncertainty, without external validation. That skill transfers into every area of life. Athletes train in off seasons when there's no crowd. Builders work before the foundation is visible. Leaders prepare long before anyone listens. This is that stage. The invisible work, the uncelebrated effort, the repetition that looks boring but creates dominance over time. One day the fog starts to lift, not all at once, just enough for you to see the next step, and by then you're already moving. You're no longer waiting for motivation. You become self-directed. You've built momentum through discipline. When that clarity finally arrives, you're ready for it because discipline prepared you to hold it. Motivation can spark action, but discipline sustains progress. That's why this phase is necessary. It teaches you how to keep going without emotional rewards. Eventually, you'll look back at this time differently. What felt like losing interest in everything was actually losing attachment to distractions. What felt like emptiness was space being created for something more solid. What felt like confusion was the beginning of focus. This was the moment you stopped chasing excitement and started building direction. The moment you stopped asking how to feel better and started asking how to be better. The moment you took responsibility for your future instead of waiting for inspiration to rescue you. Discipline doesn't make noise. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up every day and does the work. And that's why it wins in the long run. So don't panic when nothing excites you. Don't numb it. Don't run from it. Listen, because this is the stage where comfort dies and purpose starts forming. You're not falling off. You're being pulled forward. And what comes next is built by the discipline you choose today. This is the beginning, not the end.